Hello, I'm Rick Harp, host of APTN News Brief, a daily podcast version of the nightly broadcast of APTN National News. Available on all major podcast platforms, APTN News Brief is your quick way to hear the headlines every weekday morning. Learn more at aptnnews.ca/podcasts.
We are APTN Investigates. On this episode,
Algonquins in Ontario have serious issues with identity. Thousands have been declared non-Algonquin. How did this happen? I'm Rob Smith. Find out in my episode, Return to Algonquin Country. Last season, we brought you the story about the troubles in Algonquin territory.
Because there seems to be some sort of action. There's some more engaged youth, definitely, from Pikwakanagan.
I have a difficult time understanding who would have lived their entire life, say, you know what, I'm going to be Algonquin. I'm envious of them, or perhaps I just want to sabotage them.
In 200 meters, you will arrive at your destination.
A lot of the people who were enrolling in these processes were not Algonquin.
One lone ancestor 12 generations back is entirely insufficient.
Critics pointed out possibly 1,000 to 4,000 people eligible to benefit from a land claim were in fact non-Algonquin. The organization known as the Algonquins of Ontario held a tribunal and found its membership criteria was not rigorous enough.
The immediate implication is that over 2,000 individuals will be kicked off the registry of the Algonquins of Ontario. They won't have a place any longer in the negotiations or representation. They were not Algonquin to begin with.
And here's a quick reminder. The Algonquins of Ontario, or the AOO, an organization of 10 Algonquin communities formed to negotiate a land claim. 30,000 square kilometers of land located in eastern Ontario. So I'm back in Algonquin territory, traveling the highways and byways with two questions on my mind. What is the future of this claim, and will the AOO survive?
We've instituted an action against the Algonquins of Ontario, Canada, and Ontario.
First, let's meet the Aitman clan.
Hello. How are you? Good, how are you guys?
You want a little salt on that? A little what? Salt? Salt. Yeah.
They believe the AOO let them down.
What were we called at one time? Rebels. You just want to be a rebel. You just have to make trouble.
That's our family doing it, allowing it, and supporting her. Catherine wouldn't have got this far if it wasn't for our family members.
And they don't want anything to go wrong with the land claim. This is what I think too. So, and since she was, a part of that, well, then the whole thing's going to be questioned, and then, okay, so what goes from there?
They are talking about the woman who represented them as chief for decades, Catherine Cannon. Cannon says she's Irish Algonquin, her ancestors from Baptiste Lake. In 1991, Cannon was recognized by the AOO as chief, a position she held for 27 years. She received an Indian name, Stillwaters, by someone she described as a medicine woman from the East Coast.
This is me, and my brother, and my sister.
Eleanor Yateman is the matriarch of this clan, born at Baptiste Lake in a little cabin.
But I was Dad's little girl, He called me his little bag of gold. Mom said when I was born, he called me his little bag of gold. Oh, this is my father, who was a military police in the army, and he used to ride a motorcycle. Anyway, it was wonderful, and we were a close-knit family at Baptiste.
Our ancestors passed away.
She was involved politically when the idea of the land claim was in its infancy back in the early 90s. She believes her position was usurped.
No one will listen to me because an ordinary person. I'm not cheap. I'd like us to be recognized as who we are. It has nothing to do with money, it has nothing to do with the land claim. It has to do with who we are and what we are.
Cannon encouraged her family to join the claim. The Yatemans have their suspicions, but they believe concerns they've raised at the AOO have fallen on deaf ears. Cannon's heritage claim has not been publicly challenged inside the AOO, and to be clear, the tribunal did not investigate her lineage this past summer. So, what's at stake? In 2016, an agreement in principle was signed. In it, a $300 million one-time payment and a land transfer of no less than 117,500 acres of provincial crown land. How this is continuing to go forward. Are there... To be an eligible Algonquin beneficiary, you had to prove a genealogical tie to a root ancestor.
I don't talk to him anymore, but I am...
During my first visit, Dr. Veldon Coburn, professor at the University of Ottawa, explained how this method could go wrong.
It's been quite diluted lately, especially with this modern treaty of the Algonquins of Ontario and sort of the usurpation of our identity to claim Algonquin Indigenous title and rights. It's been manufactured in many cases and in a lot of cases propped up by forged documents.
The Algonquins of the Pikwakanagan First Nation started the claim, the only federally recognized First Nation completely located in Ontario. Non-status Algonquin were required to be represented. Over the years, 9 communities were recognized and joined the AOO. The list of root ancestors was compiled by the AOO. Some Algonquin dispute the legitimacy of this way of doing things. The claim started in 1991, and in 2015, almost 25 years later, it was a mess.
And I'm looking through, I'm like, I'm seeing names from high school. I'm seeing names of people who hated me as a fucking Indian.
An internal review that year called into question the ancestry of up to 3,000 voting members. But the next year, an agreement in principle was ratified. Dr. Coburn got his hands on that voting list. He found some characters.
People, and I'm like, you hated us. Now you're on this list?
Hector Cloutier was a Liberal MP in the late 90s.
So some people might not understand.
He had made some really unseemly comments on CBC radio during an interview in the early 1990s.
They are saying we're not interested in money, and they want to get back to the land, and yet many of them are trying to wring every dollar they can get from the government through subsidies. I asked Jean Chrétien at that meeting, personal meeting with him on the Hill, I said, you tell me, Jean, what I said that was against Liberal Party policy on the Aboriginals. He couldn't or wouldn't show me. Some natives say that we are racist, but yet they stridently insist upon keeping and preserving at taxpayers' expense their own segregated minority.
A disputed root ancestor is a voyageur named Thomas Lagarde.
And Thomas Lagarde, a member of the Masons and also descended from Algonquins. That one statement alone in this forged document magically shows up. So the fallout was the inclusion of a root ancestor who provides legitimacy to over 2,000 individuals who are not Algonquin. More than the voting population of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan.
The letter was provided by Bill Mann, an author of books about the Knights Templar, a medieval military order that has been linked to various legends and mysteries. No proof of its origin or authenticity has been provided. A CBC investigation in 2021 revealed that the letter is likely fake.
Oh yeah, here we go. I've done quite a bit of research into it. I had been looking for the original document. The church archives cannot confirm it anywhere.
Continue on Ontario 28 North for 54 kilometers.
Okay, so let's put a pin in that. And let's go back and check in on the Yatemans. It's Suspicion raised, the family looked into Cannon's claims. The files are at Donna Gould's home in Peterborough, Ontario.
About the last will and testament, John didn't mention her in the will,
but instead will be lands in fee simple.
And this is the letter to Eleanor, Mom, from Catherine, and she's trying to explain who she is. And
she phoned me and she said, your Uncle Jack Hunter said you were in charge, and I'm a Baptiste, and she gave me the names of all her family and everything, and came to my house, and I said, no, you are not a Baptiste. I have no knowledge of you, never have never heard of you, no one has heard of you.
One in our article, she's the daughter of Chief John. In one article, she's the daughter of Susan.
So Catherine's journey to being Indigenous started with her mother. She was born in 1906.
Catherine Cannon's mother was Gertrude Green. Cannon says Gertrude is the daughter of an Indigenous woman named Susan Baptiste. This is contradicted, however, by the certified baptismal record and birth certificate, which shows Gertrude was born to unknown parents.
When Gertrude was baptized, she didn't get any last name.
The record is contradicted yet again. Susan Baptiste is listed as Gertrude's mother on her marriage certificate. But wait, there's more. There is no mention of Susan in Gertrude's obituary. The family tree used to enroll Cannon in the AOO treaty process was based on her own research.
She raised 3 First Nation girls from Thunderchild First Nations. Catherine Cannon raised these girls and abused them for 17 years.
In 2014, this petition appeared online calling on the Prime Minister to remove Cannon from her position because she was not Indigenous. The petition alleged child abuse and racist attacks inflicted on the 3 sisters by Catherine Cannon. The sisters took her to court. On November 30th, 2023, Cannon lost that civil suit. Those 3 sisters do not want to be identified because Catherine Cannon is appealing the judgment. However, we will summarize the case. Those 3 sisters were in Catherine Cannon's care in the late 60s. Justice S.E. Fraser ruled Catherine assaulted the plaintiffs by beating them and whipping them on a regular basis. The plaintiffs lived in a constant state of fear, verbally abused them with language that was racist and derogatory, knew and did not tell them their true legal names and changed their legal names, contributing to a loss of identity. Character was indeed an issue at trial. Justice Fraser was not impressed with Cannon's testimony. In the end, I did not believe her. The problematic testimony did not appear due to age or confusion, but rather a deliberate attempt to overcome the vulnerabilities of the case. Fraser concluded the sisters suffered psychological injury and lost their culture, language, and identity. But on Cannon's own identity, she wrote, I cannot find that Catherine Cannon is a First Nations person. Similarly, I cannot find that she is not. We attempted to contact Catherine Cannon to ask her to participate in this story. We did not hear back from her. Her lawyer did confirm that Cannon will be appealing this ruling.
APTN presents a captivating journey into the heart of the North with our latest podcast, The Place That Thaws.
Some areas that used to be safe are no longer safe.
Hosted by me, Danielle Parody. Join us as we uncover the intricacies of life on a changing coast. Subscribe and listen to The Place That Thaws.
The fallout from this past summer's tribunal may mean up to 2,000 people are now off the beneficiary list.
What does it mean for the last 20 years where non-Algonquins have participated in treaty negotiations?
The AOO credibility could come into question. Dr. Colburn says 2 negotiators found out their root ancestor, Thomas Lagarde, was not legit.
We have left and suspended our participation in negotiations. We don't find, and I think this is a general sentiment through Pikwakanagan, that the representation that has been sort of foisted upon us was ever properly representing our legal interests and our rights.
At the moment, Coburn feels vindicated and hopeful his people will be the better for it.
We're strong enough and we're not going anywhere, and we'll fight this for decades, and we have for centuries already.
Just when it couldn't get any more confusing, into the fray comes the Amaqua people. I'm now heading out to Pembroke to speak to three men who want to rebuild a nation, and AOO castoffs are welcome.
The Amaqua people have a history that's documented very thick on the coastlines of Georgian Bay, Lake Superior, along the French River, the Lake Nipissing, and the Ottawa River system. We have oral history legend that describes the Kichiamik, the great beaver, in creating all these people.
We've instituted an action against the Algonquins of Ontario, Canada, and Ontario to speak to the ejection of individuals who have self-identified as Algonquin, have genealogy that confirms their connection, that allows them to self-identify as Algonquin, and have been excluded from a treaty negotiation on the basis of a beneficiary criteria established by corporate minds.
I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to tell you about our organization, the Nation of the Amaqua Nipissing Allies. We are here with you, working to rebuild the once mighty nation of the Amaqua.
Right on the land that you're stepping on right now, this is going to be declared an Amaqua sanctuary. We're putting up a community center, we're going to put up a healing lodge, and we're going to bring our elders in to teach us.
The imposition of British common law on the nation is untenable. The relationship is nation.
Right now, it's an aspirational movement. Corey Pierce has volunteered to sign people up.
It is imperative that the Amaqua Nipissing nation reclaim its true power and restore the
self-declaration, and what happens at the end is we put an affidavit on it. So we swear an oath on top of this. And I have to include my long-form birth certificate or baptismal to my parents, and parent-child, all the way back to a root ancestor within the original Algonquin Schedule A.
Our first concern is that our kinship is identified. So through that, that's the work we've undertaken. We have stressed very much that the genealogical record is the foundation of our national identity.
The Amaqua have already tried to start a constitutional challenge. In 2021, 54 defendants in the Lake Nipissing community had to pay hunting fines when a judge ruled there was no evidence of an Amaqua nation. Stacey McQuabe was rejected as an expert witness. It didn't faze him. To him, the entire Canadian experiment is a fraud.
The Crown has authored its fictitious Indian into a position where they're trying to be the administrator of the original title, which can't be because Crown puppets are simply puppets.
The Nation of Amaqua Nipissing Allies has made a statement of claim believing the Amaqua held sway over a vast territory now known as Ontario and Quebec. They have petitioned King Charles directly.
We're working towards recognition of the Amaqua Nation for the purposes of being able to advance the conversation into a higher level. And the conversation as it's been directed purposely by Canada and Ontario through the negotiation process.
You are not going to ask us to sell our land. You are not going to ask us to waive our rights. And you are not going to ask us to exploit our children. That's it. End of story. We need to find a new way.
The Nation of Amaqua Nipissing Allies is not a registered First Nation. It's not a corporate entity, and it's not a nonprofit. But they are signing up members, close to 3,800, according to Pierce.
And what we've done is provided a transparent process for people, and this includes people that are still on the beneficiary list, as well as people that don't want to be on that, and people that have been removed.
From the perspective of someone saying I'm Native and they're not, that's just plain wrong. Just plain wrong. So, but that doesn't mean that's what self-identification meant. Self-identification doesn't mean, oh, I've identified myself as Indigenous, therefore I am.
The Nation of the Amaqua Nipissing Allies is in its infancy. Impossible to predict what type of traction they'll gain. Will history repeat itself? The history that for the Gould-Yateman family saw an organization created to entrench their rights, put in place a leader they didn't believe in. Catherine Cannon retired from her position in 2017, but Donna feels the official record has to be corrected.
And we are very passionate about this, and we've been doing it a long time. And we spend, I go to bed thinking about this.
That's why I don't get rid of
The family feels like they've been put through the ringer.
Personally, it's affecting my mental well-being because I think about this all the time and how our family is not recognized, the true Baptiste Kichichu Manitou people. Oh yeah, and over there, there's a turtle that lives over there because it scared me one day. We were walking down. I also want the truth for my mother.
I mean, he's retired.
She's 86 years old and she's on the sidelines of all this, where she should be up front.
I'd like our family to get to know each other without this person in the middle dividing everybody. We don't have a very good name, like we're troublemakers and that. Well, they just want us to be quiet and go away, but we can't. And it's important for our children, grandchildren, and all the descendants of. And I have 2 great-grandchildren, little girls, and we want to teach them the right way.
Hello, I'm Rick Harp, host of APTN News Brief, a daily podcast version of the nightly broadcast of APTN National News. Available on all major podcast platforms, APTN News Brief is your quick way to hear the headlines every weekday morning. Learn more at aptnnews.ca/podcasts.
Hi, I'm Rob Smith. Welcome back. Shortly before airtime, it was confirmed that nearly 2,000 people will be removed from Algonquin membership rolls. This due to the tribunal held last summer. Changes are expected. Sources are telling APTN the AOO will dissolve and a new negotiating body will be set up. Communities have been advised to find their own representation. We've reached out to AOO officials but have had no response. Pikwakanagan Chief Greg Sarazan has reached out to us. He won't bury the AOO just yet, saying reorganization is possible but no decision has been made. He did confirm that Pikwakanagan has retained its own lawyer going forward to help negotiate the land claim. Sarazan was the head negotiator way back in the 90s when this whole thing began. He says it was the government of Canada and Ontario that insisted upon the inclusion of the non-status. With talks stalled, there is a sense of urgency that things get back on track, but not before a review is completed. A review that will look at the criteria that allowed for 2,000 non-Algonquins to walk through the door. And any changes made will have to be approved by his community. To see that entire interview with the chief, look for it on our website, aptnnews.ca/investigates.
Hi, I'm Dennis Ward, host of Face to Face. Coming up on our next episode, I'll be sitting down with Joseph Foray. He lost his son last year to an accidental drug poisoning and is now speaking out on the harms of fentanyl poisoning and saying, "No thanks, I'm good," to drugs. Tune in Tuesday on APTN or listen to the Face to Face podcast. Download and subscribe on your favorite player.
Thanks for listening to this story. If you'd like to hear more from Investigates, visit aptnnews.ca/podcasts. You can watch APTN Investigates every Friday on APTN. Visit us on social media and catch up on our stories at aptnnews.ca, the APTN News YouTube channel, and the APTN News app. The Investigates team includes reporters Brittany Guillot, Christopher Reed, and Kenneth Jackson, and video journalists Rob Smith and Tom Fenario. I'm Josh Grummett, and I'm an associate producer for the show. Our producer is Colin Crozier, and our executive producer is Paul Barnsley. Members of the APTN National News team also contribute to many of our stories. Once again, thanks for listening.
I'm Kathleen Martins, a reporter with APTN News. Homeless, houseless, shelterless people, they aren't hard to find in Winnipeg. They're on the sidewalks, in bus shelters, and down alleyways. They're living in tents and squatting in empty buildings. They're even sleeping in abandoned cars. But who are they? Hear their stories in my new 5-part podcast called Our Relatives. Listen on your favorite player.